Is this Charles Curley on the phone right now?
Indeed it is.
It's good to talk to you again. It's been a while.
Indeed it has. And the last time we talked, I said I'd give you an update on the American Lands Council.
And good. And I had Ken Ivory on just a couple of weeks ago talking about some of these very topics. But I'd like to know, well, first off, let's set the stage for those people who don't know what the American Lands Council is. What is it that you guys do?
Okay, a little bit of history here. As each state was formed, it went through various legal hoops, including a bill of admission and stuff like that. And every single state, other than the original 13, has language in that process that says we the state, surrender our public lands to the federal government for the purpose of extinguishing title. That's the 25-cent phrase in there, and that basically means they're going to sell it off and otherwise dispose of it. And the federal government is supposed to get out of the landowning business. Mm-hmm. Well, if you look around Wyoming, you'll notice they haven't done that.
No, they haven't. Now, what I asked, I wonder if you have a different answer. What I asked Ken Ivory about this is, was there a specific date set on when they were supposed to dispose of the land?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I have not found one.
All right.
But it was a promise, and you kind of want to keep promises in a timely manner.
Well, let's take it a step further than that, Charles. It was a contract, wasn't it?
Yes, the Supreme Court has said it's a contract.
Right.
And if it is a contract, the rule on contract law is if one party fails to keep its part of the contract, then there's no further obligation on the other parties.
Right. Okay, now let me toss something into that. Let's say you and I entered into a contract, and things were going fine for quite a few years. Then one day, on a whim, I just decided I was going to change the terms of the contract to satisfy a different idea that I had because I said so. How would that hold up in court?
Well, it depends on the language of the contract.
Right.
If you look at your contract with your credit card company, you see that they can do that. Mm-hmm. But you agreed to that when you took the credit card.
Which is why I don't have credit cards.
Good idea.
Yeah.
So they, but in general, no. And that gets back to what I just said. If you change the terms, try to change the terms of the contract unilaterally and say, well, I'm not going to make my rent payments anymore, mm-hmm. then the other party, in this case the landlord, can say, well, in that case, you get out of my apartment.
Right. Okay. So now, since the federal government changed the terms of the contract, and before I get into this question, let's define it, if you will, for me, Charles. Change the terms of the contract how? What did they say?
In the 1970s, they passed an act called FLEMA, and I forget what all that stands for,
right.
Federal Lands Management Act or something like that. Mm-hmm. And it basically said, well, we're not going to transfer the lands back again. However, as a SOP to the states, we will instead give them money. And mm-hmm. that's the origin of what we call PILT, Payment in Lieu of Taxes.
Right.
Secure schools money, and a couple of other things.
Have they given that money?
They have been.
Okay.
They have started to really tone it down. Like last year, 2013, Wyoming's PILT money was cut by more than 50%. Mm-hmm. And we can expect it to be cut again in the future as the feds scramble around and try to deal with their deficit.
Okay, I'm talking with Charles Curley from Wyoming Liberty Group. We're talking about federal lands, or what maybe should be state lands. So, okay, at some point, a few states, if I remember this right, got together and sued the federal government over a breach of contract. How did that turn out?
That actually worked out pretty well. If you look at the American Lands Council website, which is, surprise, at AmericanLandCouncil.org, AmericanLandsCouncil.org, the first thing you'll see is a map that shows the country divided in half between the western states and the eastern states, basically right at the Colorado-Nebraska line.
Right.
Everything west of Colorado is heavily federal lands. Everything east of Colorado is very small percentage of federal land, 1, 2, 3%. And like states like Rhode Island, I don't think Rhode Island has any federal land.
Right.
But a lot of those states came into the Union with huge amounts of federal land. That great western state, Florida, was more than 90% federal land initially. Yeah. Mississippi, Louisiana, Indiana, Illinois, etc. Same story. Those states got together early in the 19th century, and they started putting pressure on Congress. It took about 30 years, but they did it.
Mm-hmm.
So they got the federal government to honor the contract. Now, Hawaii in the 1950s, shortly after they gained statehood, they sued, they recovered their federal lands.
So why haven't we done it then? Why didn't we get on board back then?
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Well, in the 19th century, of course, we were still a territory.
Mm-hmm.
But if you mean Hawaii, I'm not sure why we didn't join then.
Right.
So here's the strategy that the American Lands Council has laid out. A bunch of the states, the few remaining states, the 11 or so that still have massive federal land, Wyoming, Nevada, New Mexico, and one of my favorites, California, we should all get together and do this as a group.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the states did early in the 19th century. They won, and they set a precedent. So that the strategy worked then, it probably will work now. The other thing that happens is this is going to take time. It's going to take money. If we have to go to the Supreme Court, there's several $1 million at a minimum. If Wyoming goes it alone, we bear that expense. Also, if we have to go to Congress for legislation, we have 2 senators and 1 representative.
Mm-hmm.
How about we get a bunch of other states, including California, with 53 representatives and get them on board?
I'm talking with Charles Curley from Wyoming Liberty Group about federal lands and should there be state lands and the American Lands Council. So, okay, are other states joining us? Because it sounds to me like maybe a few states are on board anyway.
Well, the ball is just getting started. But early in May, the council held a legislative summit, and they invited legislators from the affected states to join them in Salt Lake City. Wyoming, by the way, had one of the largest delegations there. We had 13 legislators. We also had 2 county commissioners. Lincoln County, Wyoming is a member of the American Lands Council. So if your listeners want something to do, put some pressure on your county commissioners or your town and get them to join the American Lands Council.
Mm-hmm.
Membership for a county or a municipality is $1,000, and that's pretty cheap considering what's at stake.
Yeah, well, it's better than getting a sustainability coordinator and joining the Agenda 21 thing, I tell you. So, well, if you're going to spend your money somewhere, might as well get our lands back. Why not? All right, so since you're in the state of Wyoming, are you down in Cheyenne today?
No, I'm in Vermopolis today.
Okay, so how has Cheyenne reacted to this? I mean, do you find the governor's on board or any state legislators have joined up?
Well, like I said, we had 13 legislators at the council get together early in May. That's a good start.
Right.
We recently passed legislation, and Governor Meade signed it, expanding the authority of one of the legislative committees to look into transfer of federal lands to the states.
Right.
So the legislature is starting to get on board. We have people, one of the ringleaders in the legislature is David Miller from Fremont County. Also, Eli Bebout from Fremont County is very much on board.
Well, let me ask you this way. Since we're heard in a bunch of different states here. Oh, and by the way, we pick up KVOC in Casper, Wyoming as our next affiliate station. So we get to expand this obnoxious radio show host to get another market somewhere. Looking for that. Like, that's Monday. I think we're supposed to start with them. So, okay.
Excellent.
Let's say that since this has already been, in court decided, what if we just turned, and I think I already know your answer, but might as well, put the question out there. What's stopping us from just turning to the federal government and say, this has already been decided in court, so we're just going to take that land over?
Well, actually, Utah has already done that.
Yeah.
Last year, they passed a bill setting a deadline. We want our federal lands back, and here's the date. And if I remember correctly, it's the end of this year.
Oh.
So they are running the experiment, and we'll see what happens.
Well, what's going to happen is going to be interesting, because if the state of Utah takes that land back, they may just turn to some gas and oil and rare earth mineral developers and say, hey, guys, get out there and get to work. And if that happens, what's the BLM going to do? I like that answer.
And that's an interesting question.
Yeah.
We've already seen the extent they're willing to go to with the great foofara over in Clark County a few weeks ago.
Right.
They pushed, and people pushed back, and the BLM went away. Now, it's not over yet.
Right.
Because we don't know what the BLM has in mind to do next over there.
Well, and there's something that if Utah were to do this, and the BLM were to show up and say, no, you can't do that, we're going to take you to court. Yeah, but it's already been decided in court, so forget that. Well, then that means that the governor is going to have to make sure law enforcement is there to protect the people who are out there drilling and digging for a living.
Yep.
Yeah. It could get sticky. This could be interesting for a talk show host,
Yeah. You want to be reporting live from the oil rig that's there in spite of the BLM?
Yeah, well,
I'm lively.
I should go out and price some Kevlar first. But so let's make sure that we got this correct for folks, that there are several different methods going on right now that states are trying to use to get lands back from the federal government. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is the American Lands Council approach is the largest in terms of number of states involved, and I believe from my research that it's closest to what's been tried and found successful in the past.
Okay. All right. So, and there's probably, it sounds like, only just one state that's actually just trying to say, okay, so we're just going to go ahead and take our land back.
Well, Utah's ahead of the pack, definitely. As you probably know, Ken Ivory is an attorney in Salt Lake City, and he's also a state legislator, and he's gotten a number of bills through. Among other things, the state of Utah has put $2 million into the Attorney General's office for this purpose.
$2 million. Okay. Well, I guess they're getting pretty serious about it then.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Let me correct myself on that. They have put $2 million into a legislative task force. So they've got, their legislature has the money to do some serious work on this. And their freshly appointed Attorney General, Sean Race, is very much on board with this. In fact, I met him recently while working on this stuff. Good guy.
Okay.
So they're out ahead of the pack.
Right.
I told you we met in a summit, if you will, in May. California wasn't there. Oregon had one legislator. And, so the response varies all over the western states.
Right.
So part of our job in the next few months is to get the other states on board.
Right. Okay. Now, you don't have a crystal ball. You wouldn't know this, but just kind of curious. So California isn't there. Why? Why wouldn't some other states join with you, do you think?
I don't know. I think they need to understand what the situation is.
Right.
Remember, most California legislators are urban.
Right.
They haven't dealt with the BLM the way you and I have.
Yeah.
They haven't dealt with the Forest Service up close.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't know what's going on, and they also don't understand the economics of this. This is millions of acres. The federal government has about $500 million half a billion acres
Right.
tied up, not producing revenue, for example, not funding schools the way it could be. So to get California on board, we need to do some education with urban legislators. Now, we can do that. East Coast states are aware of this. South Carolina legislature has passed a resolution in support of this. And our Republican National Committee woman from Wyoming, Marty Halverson, had a resolution in the Republican National Committee in winter. She got sponsors from all over the country. Right. Connecticut, I believe, joined, and South Carolina joined. So we are talking to the eastern states, getting them involved. They have a very clear interest in this, and that is to stop funding that PILT money that's coming out of their taxes.
Well, and I think part of your argument might be a lot of these people in these states see the PILT money come in, as you call it, and I think what they see is, oh, look, we're getting this check, which of course is getting smaller and smaller all the time. They don't realize that if they take that away from the federal government, they can just make money off of their own land instead of receiving a check.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Why have your lands managed by the federal government when you can do it yourself?
Yeah. Oh, makes a whole lot of sense.
To show you what's at stake here, the federal government loses on average $1.86 an acre.
Yeah. All right, I'm sorry, I got to cut you off because it's the bottom of the hour break, and so that eats up our time. Hey, it's great to talk to you again. We got to get together and meet in person one of these days.
Bye-bye.
Bye.